When we think with our heart and feel with our brain, the river of wisdom begins to flow. Now, you really need to open your mind to completely grasping what this statement means. Because the notion, think with one's heart, is actually feel with one's heart. But you apply the thinking, or what you interpret as thinking, to your heart. And you feel with your brain, but you're actually just thinking about your feelings. I believe when we think with our heart, that is where wisdom is. I believe that the feelings that we have, the intuitions that we have, they are outside of space and time. And people assume that it is more rational to use our logic, our rational brain to tackle the problems of our lives, whether that be depression, social situation, fill in the blank with whatever you wish to. And we try to apply our brains to it instead of feel. I'm reminded of a situation recently where it was one of my last days in Indonesia, because as you can see now, I am home after my 6 month trip, but it was one of my last days and I had a dinner planned with a friend. And I met this guy in my hostel, and he essentially invited himself to dinner with us. And I remember thinking, like, I don't want this person to come. And I rationally, I used my brain to think about, this whole situation. And I was like, maybe he can give something to the conversation. Maybe I don't know him that well, but maybe somehow on one of my last days I make one of my best friends on the whole trip. And I'm thinking about all these things, but then I reminded myself, I can't tackle this problem rationally, quote unquote rationally. Let me think with my heart. And I thought with my heart, and it was an easy question. I didn't want him to come. And when we think with our brain, sometimes we try to walk on eggshells. We we avoid the discomfort and we apply a rational thought to that which will help us avoid the discomfort and say, okay, I don't want to be rude. Maybe he had a bad day. I won't say that he can't come. But that's just, we make it seem altruistic. We make it seem selfless, but in reality it's selfish because we don't want to deal with the discomfort. So, long story short, I told him essentially, I don't want you to come, and it was the end of that. And I had a great last meal with one of my great friends that I made. And it's a trivial example, but it solidifies the point enough on where we know exactly what we want. We know, we can feel in our heart. And that's like the paradox I'm trying to explain to you. You already think with your heart, but you deny it. And then you try to think with your brain. But in reality, we know in our heart of hearts what is right. We know in our heart of hearts what we want. We know in our heart of hearts what we should be doing, what we should be striving for. And we need to have faith in this feeling, in this intuition that we have, that it is outside of space and time, that it is guiding us to the path that we need to walk. And in reality, if you can accept the fact that this thing in your heart, the still small voice, your intuition, your gut feeling, if you can accept that this is outside of space and time, it becomes the most rational thing to listen to this and not to your brain, which is essentially the ego. The brain is a tool, and I think we use this tool in a wrong way so often. The brain, it's like a phone, an amazing tool, one of the most remarkable tools ever created, one by man and one by God. And but when we use these tools for the wrong things, they might as well be useless, or not even useless, but destructive. And when we try to apply matters of meaning, purpose, why, metaphysical, abstract, what I should be doing with my life, what I should do in this exact moment, I don't think the brain is where we should go. I don't think the brain is best suited. I think the heart is better suited. And maybe, and you also have to understand this. If my theory is true that these gut intuitions, these thoughts, these feelings that we just know are real, if they are truly outside of space and time, then the action we make now may not seem quote unquote rational for this duration of time. But then once in this duration of time, we will see how it had to happen that way. It couldn't have happened any other way for us to end up here. And if we didn't trust our heart, we never would have ended up here. And sure, maybe the first 3 years, we could look back and say, that was foolish. Why did I trust myself? But that is truly a question that should never be asked. Why? What else are you going to trust in this world? If you don't trust your heart, if you don't trust your intuition, your gut, yourself, what else do you think deserves your trust? It's the brain is a slippery slope. You say don't trust your thoughts, but I think thoughts are actually more divine than thinking. I think the ego has more control over thinking and less control over thoughts. And as I said, it's a tool, and it's a tool with applied in the right area, applied in the right circumstance, it is nothing compares. But if you use it in the wrong circumstance, it's destructive, truly. So we need to understand when and where to use the brain and to realize that it lies to us. For some reason, the ego, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't want you to become the best version of yourself. It doesn't want you to realize your potential. It doesn't want you to become this person that you're meant to become. And I think thinking is where the ego has more of a foothold than in thoughts. And we also can't trust all thoughts. This is why it's a hard concept, but that's why you use your heart. If you have a thought that doesn't feel right, then it's clear what to do. But if the thought feels right, and then destroys your thought, then I think it should be clear that the thought was divine and the thinking was the ego. And I often say that we know exactly what we need to do. All we need to do is ask. It goes back to the Bible statement, knocketh and the door will open, or something like of that nature. And I believe that is true. When you ask, what do I need to do with my life? It's that first thought, that first thing that comes to your brain, that's your path. That's the way that you walk. That's what you're meant to be doing next, in the future, at present. But then we apply thinking to that thought. We come up with all the reasons why this will not work, why we're behind the eight ball, why maybe a few years ago that would have been good, but now it's too late. So many things, so many reasons we come up with. And we believe that to be rational. I guess the whole point I'm trying to make here is that the most rational thing we can do is trust our heart. There's I don't know, I guess in the self-help movement, even in philosophy, there's the idea that we shouldn't trust our feelings. And I used to believe this. I used to think that was sound advice. But now I'm not so convinced that it's such a good idea to not trust your feelings. What else do you trust? What else do we put faith in if not our feelings? What else is real if not our feelings? Life is meant to be felt. Why else would we live? And if we're suppressing our feelings, if we're not listening to them, And also, this is another fine line. Life is, you're always walking a fine line with all advice, all philosophy, everything. Moderation is the answer. You know, excess or um, lack thereof is going to lead you down a bad path. But understanding that if you are able to hone in on these feelings, interpreting them correctly, understanding their true purpose, their true meaning, what they really bubble up inside of you, I believe you'll be, I guess, unstoppable in a sense. You'll be you'll have so much meaning. You'll have so much purpose. You'll feel life so deeply. You'll have you'll have heaven at your fingertips. And this all comes from the idea of trusting our feelings, of understanding why they're there, of having faith that we're having these feelings for a reason. They aren't just things that happen for no reason. I think sometimes we can think that that's the case, that feelings are just wrong. We feel depressed and it's wrong. It's not good. It's bad. But well, why? You know, there's the idea that nature doesn't waste energy. And then you got to really question the fact of things like why we have certain feelings, why we dream, things of that nature. You truly have to start questioning if you think nature doesn't waste energy. And if you can apply the lens that, if I feel depressed, it's because I'm walking the wrong path. And I should be blessed. I should feel blessed. I should be grateful that depression came to me now and not later when I was 10 steps further down the line. Now I can make a correction here and now. We need to be grateful for these things. Envy, you know, a lot of the things that, give me chills in a good way and, make me emotional when in an envy sense are I view as a compass, a guide to the life that my soul, my spirit, my heart wants me to live. If I see, if I keep remembering a scene in a book where, or in a movie, or in a show, or in anything, or even in real life, where someone was, displaying honor, was being, was showing justice, was being admirable, that is a guide. That is what I believe I should strive for. And when you feel envy towards these people, as I said, it's always a fine line. You shouldn't let it destroy you, but you should let it remind you that you could be more, that you should be more, that you need to be more, that as you are now is not enough. There's this idea that uh, it's a topic for another day. But these feelings are guides. These feelings are trying to show us the fine line to walk. I believe they're divine. And sometimes, maybe the ego can get in there and we shouldn't trust these things and we shouldn't completely give ourselves over to these emotions. But if you feel angry, there's a reason why you feel angry and you should look into it. I'm not saying that you should completely give into it, but you should ask why. What is this trying to show me? What is this trying to teach me? What should I do? And then if you ask yourself, how should I handle this? And it says completely give in to your anger, then I think you should. Because but I mean from your heart of hearts. I never deny your heart of hearts. No matter what anybody says, no matter what any social thing says, no matter what, never deny your heart. Never deny the still small voice, your intuition, your gut, whatever you want to call it. I may say any of those one titles at any moment in time, but they mean the same thing to me. And I believe there's nothing worse than going against this. There's nothing worse than going against your heart, your conscience, whatever it says, even if it's not rational to you or to the world. What is rationality? We cannot prove that my theory that these things are outside of space and time is wrong. So you can't say that it's not the most rational action to follow what your heart tells you to do. And if you're not going to follow your heart, what are you going to follow? That goes back to what I talked about earlier. Are you going to trust some random person who has no idea about your life? Some book that isn't taking your personal circumstance into account? Some person who has no idea what you want to become? Or even, there's this idea of, having mentors and, following other people's footsteps. But we all walk our own individual, unique paths. And I can say with confidence that no one has ever achieved what I'm seeking. So why should I follow anybody? Now this doesn't come from a place of me saying no one can help me. This isn't me saying that no one is of benefit to me in any circumstance because no one has lived what I want. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to copy anybody. There isn't anyone I can look at and say, oh, just because maybe I want to write a book doesn't mean I'm going to do what another author may have done to finish a book. Because you only ever see a small portion. Maybe they wrote a book, but maybe their whole life fell apart at the same time. And it's not what I want. So we have to walk our own unique individual path. We can't judge our path compared to other people's, and we can't judge other people's paths also. Now, most people don't listen to their heart. Most people don't trust themselves. So in reality, we can judge them, but only in the basis that they're not trusting their heart, not in the basis of their action. An action, if there's the same action, but in the situation A, it was one person trusting their heart, in situation B, it was some person trusting the advice of another. In my opinion, situation A is completely okay, and situation B is completely not okay. We need to trust ourselves. There's nothing else worth trusting in this world. And you also, if you've spent enough time trusting yourself and trusting what other people think is best for you, you realize in those moments when you trust yourself and you make a mistake, it's so fruitful. You learn so much. You actually take in the lessons that the situation is offering. But when you listen to another person and you mess up, it's just excuse after excuse after excuse. If I didn't listen to this person, I would have succeeded. They're so stupid. Why did I do this? What was I thinking? But when you trust yourself and you have no scapegoat, you know, we're still we're not wise. I'm not wise. Nobody's wise. And we need to not give ourselves this the ability to have a scapegoat and not learn the lessons. And that's all trusting other people. That's all trusting other people does. That's all it ever will do. And if you fall while trusting yourself, that's okay. The world will criticize you. The world the world is foolish, and they don't criticize input, they criticize output. There's you may know Ryan Holiday from I have a bunch of his books behind me. A bunch of his books. I think he's a good author, but I think he's also misguided in many ways. And one way is his opinion of, I think, American Apparel. He used to work there, and there's like Dale Carnegie or something. I've heard him tell the story, like a million times, like 3 years ago when I used to watch him. But he, I used to think he was so right about this Dale Carnegie guy and how he let ego get the best of him, how he took this business that was so good, so ripe for success, and drove it to the ground and bankrupt, da, 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 the whole 9 yards. I used to think, yeah, What a dumbass. What an idiot. But now I look back at that situation and I don't have nearly enough information to judge it accurately. And I don't know if Ryan does either. Because, and I've heard Ryan say this before, and this is what people say, oh, in the beginning, he was a trailblazer. He was just trusting his heart. He was just, he couldn't lose. And then somewhere along the line, it got too big. He refused help, this, that, and the other, and it collapsed. But if it didn't collapse, he would have been a genius. But it collapsed, so he's a moron. That's how the world criticizes people. If it succeeds, then somehow they were a genius. And if it fails, then they were a fool. But business is such a trivial thing in this life. If Dale Carnegie truly trusted his heart, maybe there was lessons that he learned through that experience that made him wiser, made him a better man. The things that actually matter in this world, not just a successful business, not just more money, another few zeros in the bank account. That's not what matters. What matters is trusting your heart. And if Dale trusted his heart and that's what drove his business to the ground, I think he did nothing wrong. And I pray he learned the lessons that was trying to teach him, that it was happening for him and not to him. Now I don't nearly know enough, but I don't think Ryan does either. And I think I only use that example because it can go around the world. It is applied to so many situations. Throughout history, there's the people who trusted themselves and became great, and there's the people who trusted themselves and fell. And society, they only criticize them for the output. No one cares that they both trusted their heart. No one cares that they both listened to the still small voice. Nobody cares that one got lucky and one got unlucky, quote unquote. It's just the output and saying, well, this one must have been smarter and this one must have been stupider because this one's output was in earthly standards good and this one's output in earthly standards was bad. And that's the only rule people use to measure success and failure. And that's why you can't care about what the world thinks about you, because the output is completely out of your control. All you can do is focus on the input. And in the input, all you should do is trust your heart. All you should do is trust yourself. Trust that it's outside of space and time. Trust that even if it's a quote unquote failure, it was a success because it was meant to happen that way. How many successful people are so depressed? And don't you think that they would rather have failed, trusted their heart and failed and became happy, than denied their heart, succeeded, and lived depressed? That's why I don't think the brain is the tool to use for, at this stage in, Maslow's hierarchy, the brain is not the tool to give us meaning, to give us purpose, to give us hope, humanity. I mean, it's not the tool. Yet we're still using it. Yet we're still trying to be rational. When the most rational thing we can do is trust our heart. Believe that it's outside of space and time. Thoughts, feelings, intuition, and go with it. If we don't, it'll eat us alive anyways. So might as well live the life we feel as if we are meant to live. And if it all doesn't work out, we end up in the same place anyways. We'll all be dead. No one will remember our name. At least live a life that feels right, that feels true, that doesn't feel forced, that you enjoy. And, listen to your heart. Think with your heart, and the river of wisdom will flow.